My name is Lucy Elizabeth Moseley. I was born on July 5th, 1844 in London, England. When I was quite young, my parents moved to New York, where I lived until I was 31 years of age. Since the time I came to America, I returned to Europe twice before my marriage. My second voyage was for the purpose of having my two younger sisters baptized in St. Paul's Anglican Church in London, where all my family has been christened. My mother and father would have it no other way. On my return, the ship we boarded caught fire, so we were transferred to a second ship, but it lost its rudder and was wrecked on the coast of France. It was on this voyage that I met my husband, Mr. Moseley, who was coming from England with his mother. After 4 years, I married Mr. Moseley, and we settled in New York around 1868. At the time, my husband was a shipping clerk for Mr. Valentine in New York. Mr. Valentine was a close friend of our family, and we put trust in his wisdom and experience. He began to urge us to go west, where we would purchase section after section of land and become wealthy as anyone in New York within 12 months. We thought about that prospect for many nights and then decided to follow his advice. We decided to leave New York, so we said our goodbyes and took a few prized belongings and our 2-year-old son and headed west. We took passage on the train and arrived in Sherman, Texas in March of 1874. My husband looked for a wagon and secured an ox, and we started to Young County. Mr. Moseley's lacked the knowledge of the special language used to speak to ox, and we took off the corner of the hotel in Sherman, which delayed us a while, but those things just seemed to happen. We came through Pilot Point, then Jacksboro, and on to Graham. When we arrived in Graham, we found only a few shacks and 2 families. We realized how cruelly Mr. Valentine had deceived us, and my husband insisted that I take our son and go back to New York. He begged and pleaded with me. He explained that he could stay in Graham and make way for the family, and this was no place for his wife and child. But I would not leave my husband here in Graham alone to be killed by Indians, so we all remained. We lived in a tent for many months near Shawnee Springs as our home was being built. The lumber was hauled from Weatherford, and hauling it cost more than the cost of the lumber itself. Our first home was located where the Baptist Church offices are located, facing 4th Street. Our first home was a 2-story with wide porches and on both the floors so you could catch the breeze. Years later, we sold the house and moved to a nicer home on Oak Street. Our first home was added on and improved to and became the Commerce Hotel. Our first home was near the county jail, and I remember to this day the mobs and jailbreaks that often occurred those days. I remember in the evenings, the prisoners would sing sad songs. After our arrival in Graham in 1877, my husband's father, Benjamin Moseley, came to live nearby. His wife had passed away, and he was lonely living in New York by himself, so he headed west to be near his only living child, my husband. My father-in-law died on May 20th, 1883 at our home, and he's buried nearby. A surprise came to life in 1882. I became pregnant at the age of 38. The doctor said it was a change of life, baby. It was right. It did change my life. Oh, sadly, my infant died on Monday morning, August 13th in 1883, here in Graham at the age of 4 months. We laid her to rest that evening here in the cemetery. I was so sad and grief-stricken for some time after that fateful day. Oh, I remember Mr. and Mrs. Jasper Manlove's home was nearby. Miss Manlove, let's see if I can remember her name. It was Wilhelmina Carolina Amelia Manlove. Whew, that was a mouthful. She taught school at her home under a clump of trees where Innerbank is today. She only had 5 or 6 pupils. Later, more children attended her school, and she used the lower floor of the old Masonic Lodge building. We were thrilled when our son Benjamin Moseley Jr. married Lily Ann Mays on December 20th, 1894 here in Graham. My husband, Ben Moseley, he died at our home on June 1st in 1905 of stomach trouble. He was only 62 years old. My husband took great pride in the cattle and land. He was a charter member of the Texas Cattle Rangers Association, organized in Graham in February of 1877. He was a leader in the Presbyterian Church. I miss him dearly. But I still had my son, Benny, who was great help to me. I've only been out of Young County one time in the 50 years I lived here, and that was for a day trip to Fort Worth. I've been a member of the Presbyterian Church in Graham for many years, and I was a regular attendant until the few years when my health began to fail. I have good days and not so good days. In 1924, I was the oldest resident of Graham. Now, there's some people in Graham older than me, but they have not lived in Graham since 1874 when I came here. 50 years ago, it seems so short. The few people who did live in Graham when I moved to Young County are passed on or moved away. Now, there are older residents in Young County than me, but I am the oldest resident in Graham. No building now standing in Graham was here when I came so many years ago. I have seen a town of a few shacks grow into a marvelous place. Why, downtown we now even have quite a few places where you can see moving pictures on the screen. I miss my parents. They went back to England the third time and never returned to America. The last time I saw my parents was the day I came west in 1874, and they're buried in England. Since my husband's death, I have lived alone in my home on South Oak Street, but I have many good friends and neighbors who look after me with tenderness and kindness. I am Lucy Elizabeth Moseley, and I died on December 8, 1924 in my home. I was survived by my son Ben Moseley and my daughter-in-law. It was said at my passing, a good woman is gone, but her influence will continue to live in a community where she lived so long.